She looked me in the eye and asked, "Do you think I have ADHD?" I paused, not because I didn't have an answer, but because in that moment, I saw myself at her age, masked, misunderstood, and already trying to fit in. My nervous system did a full record scratch. This episode is for every mom who's unmasking right alongside her daughter and wondering what it means when the next generation starts asking the same questions we didn't have the language for. So, hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Nostalgic Neurodivergent, where parenting, advocacy, and neurodivergent identity collide with 80s, 90s vibes, real talk, and actual tools that you can use. I'm Corey, and today we're talking about what it's like when your child sparks conversation you're still having with yourself. When your daughter asks, "Could I have ADHD?" and you realize she just might be the first person in the house to say it out loud. In this episode, we'll explore the science behind intergenerational neurodivergence, why many neurodivergent moms recognize their traits through their kids, the impact of masking across generations, especially for girls, and how to start conversations around identity without needing a diagnosis. So here's what happened. My daughter looked at me and said, "Do you think I have ADHD?" I froze, but it wasn't because I was shocked, but because the fact that she even asked, that she saw it. That was a moment I never had growing up. And then she followed it with, "So he's ableist?" And this was talking about her dad, who does not believe in neurodivergence. So my jaw dropped because my 11-year-old used the word ableist in context. And suddenly I realized she had more language for her experience at 11 than I had at the age of 30 and even now at the age of 43. Science backs this. ADHD and autism are highly heritable, and if you're diagnosed as an adult, your child is statistically more likely to have similar traits. But when you're parenting without validation or support, that moment that your kid asks, it just might crack something open. Now let's talk about the masking pieces, especially for girls. So many of us were taught to perform neurotypical, to smile, be agreeable, not interrupt, not stim, and not fall apart. We call this social camouflaging, and it is a survival tool. Girls and women are often undiagnosed or underdiagnosed because our masking is praised. We're seen as mature or well-behaved, but inside, we're more than likely exhausted, disconnected from ourselves, and completely unsure of who we actually are. Now I can see my daughter doing it too. Sometimes she's pretty loud and funny at home, but then she's quiet and compliant at school. One of her teachers even commented yesterday with how well she did in leading the quiz review for their upcoming test. And she was an excellent role model. And I often see the comments about how she's great with teamwork, that she participates actively, that she, those types of comments. You probably got them when you were a kid too. See, sometimes talks too much, gets along well with others, etc., etc. All of those things that a model student is supposed to be. So now, though, like I said, I see her doing it too, and she's already learning this script, and I want to disrupt that pattern. So when she asks about traits, I try to say, "That's a really common way that some ADHD and autistic brains work," or "You're noticing a pattern to how your brain reacts. That's really smart." That way, we're leading with identity first, it's not shaming, and we're still opening conversation by using curious language. Now, let's also be clear. Your child does not need a formal diagnosis to begin self-understanding. Many late-diagnosed moms worry that they're doing it wrong by having these conversations without a doctor's note, but studies show that self-identification, when supported and informed, can increase self-esteem, improve mental health outcomes, and help kids build language around their experience. So here are 3 powerful reflection questions that I like to ask my daughter and still ask myself. Number 1, when do you feel most like yourself? Number 2, when do you feel like you have to act differently? And number 3, what makes you feel safe, calm, and seen? Obviously, these aren't diagnostic tools, but they are identity tools, and they matter. So, parenting her while reparenting myself is a full-time boss battle. I'm learning to stop masking while also trying to raise a daughter who never has to. But that means I'm making mistakes in real time. I'm showing my work, and honestly, that kind of vulnerability is one of the most powerful parenting things that I have ever done. So let's get honest. There is grief in this, real grief. Because when she asked me if she was ADHD, it wasn't just her asking, it was me, at her age, finally being seen. And then the guilt kicks in. What if I miss something, and then what if I repeat the cycle? But here's the truth, moms. You won't. Because you're already breaking the cycle because you're aware. Awareness is the first and most powerful act of advocacy. So if your daughter is asking that big question, that means you're already created a safe enough space for her to ask, and that, my friends, is everything. Being neurodivergent isn't a problem to solve, but it is a perspective to understand. The earlier we model it, the stronger they become. If this episode resonated with you, forward it to another neurodivergent mom who's figuring this out one conversation at a time. And don't forget to grab the Mom-Daughter Bonding Toolkit linked in the show notes. Let it support the conversations you might not have had growing up, but get to have now. And this whole thing, it's like realizing you weren't just an NPC in your daughter's story. You're her co-op player. You're in the game, building the map as you go. And plot twist, she thinks you're the coolest character in it.